Welcome back. In this lesson, we're going to talk about questions to ask yourself before you seek investor funding. And I really want you to take a lot of time to work through these. I know you're excited about your idea. You want to get in front of startup investors as soon as possible. But I want you to take the time to ask yourself these questions and be honest about them because they can help determine the direction you go, the type of investors you work with, and a variety of other decisions. So, before you seek investor funding, ask yourself the question, do I really need funding in the first place? Some businesses can make it work on what's called a bootstrap model or a lean model where they don't need much funding in the first place. If you don't need funding from an investor, I don't think you should go out seeking it because there can be some things that come with taking on a startup investor that don't make it worth it. So, do I need funding in the first place? Well, how do you know that? Later on, we're going to talk about financial projections. And when you do those should help you answer, will you be able to grow the business and scale it appropriately without taking money from outside investors? The next question is, am I prepared to take on this type of responsibility? Right? So there's a variety of things that come with taking on startup investors. The first is seeking startup investment can become a full-time job for the founder or founders, whoever is doing it. So chasing after investors can take up a lot of your time. The other thing to think about is that when you take on a startup investor, and this can sound a little scary, but it's honestly, they own part of you in your business. They're taking equity in their business. They deserve the right to know what's going on. They deserve the right to a return on their investment. They deserve the right to a lot of things, as you do as a founder, but they own a part of you and your company. How do you feel about taking on a partner like that? How will it feel when that investor is calling you saying you're not moving along fast enough? Your momentum is not fast enough for me. You're not making the right decisions. I want to replace you as a CEO. I don't mean to scare you, but all these things have happened to other startup founders. So you need to understand that when you take on an investor, they own part of you. They will be in your business to some extent. You need to be ready for that. Another question to think about in terms of the responsibility of startup investors is, how am I going to feel if I lose their money? It's bad enough if you've taken investment from family and friends and even put your own investment at risk. But what about when you take investment dollars from an outside investor? How are you going to feel if the startup fails and they lose that money? I know you can think to yourself, well, that's the risk they take, and that's true, but it's something that you need to consider. How's it going to feel if you ever have to call your investors and say, I lost every penny that you gave me? The business just didn't work. We couldn't make it. Investors should be using discretionary dollars to invest in startups, but not all are that diligent. So think about how it may feel if it ever comes to that. And don't be so naive to say to yourself, that will never be me. I'll never have to make that hard call. It's happened to more people than you can imagine. And I've worked with a lot of those startup founders, and that has not been tough on them. Another thing to ask yourself, and this is particularly important because it will help you avoid any fraudulent issues, is, was I transparent with the details of my business? Later on in the course, we're going to talk about due diligence and going through that process with investors where they will start to poke around on your idea, poke around with your information, and poke around and make you validate the claims that you've made. I have seen a variety of startup founders make wild claims that they cannot substantiate, and that has turned around and ended them in lawsuits with their investors. I'm actually thinking of an exact example and someone I knew right now. So, how was I transparent with the details of my business? Was I factual with my business? Did I make claims that I can support? These types of questions, asking yourself those and asking yourself if you're going to be willing to be utterly transparent with someone that you've never met before about your own private details is important because it will help guide you along the way when you're working with startup investors. So a few more questions to ask yourself. Am I sure about the amount I'm going to need? A lot of people will ask for smaller dollars because they think that makes it easier on their investor. But what happens is they end up running out of money too quick, and then they're not able to go back to the investors to get more funding. So make sure that you've thought through the amount of funding that you're asking for. Again, your financial projections will help with that. And they'll tell you if you're going to need additional rounds of funding. Sometimes investors will not give you the full amount that you're asking for. They'll give you a smaller amount, tell you to go off and further prove your model and come back to them for subsequent rounds of funding. Know up front if that's something that you're willing to do or even something that you're going to need to do. A lot of startups, most startups that scale to a significant size require additional rounds of funding. That's why I talk about things like a seed round, a Series A, Series B, Series C, Series D, Series E. If we get to Series F and G, you've probably taken too long to scale and you're going to be in trouble. But think these kinds of questions through. All right. Kind of like saying that investors will own part of you. Am I willing to give up some control of my company? It doesn't always happen with a startup, but in some instances, investors, particularly venture capitalists, when you get to that stage, will ask to put someone on your board of directors from their company. That means they're going to have a say-so in what you do as a startup founder. They'll be in the details of your business regularly. Are you willing to give up that kind of control? If not, going through startup investors is not right for you. You might want to consider loans when possible. Another key question is whether you're coachable in the first place. A lot of these startup investors have been successful in their own careers, and so they bring valuable information and knowledge to the table. But I've seen plenty of startup founders who just aren't coachable, and so the investors end up being turned off by them. What else do I need from my investors? It isn't always about money. We'll talk about this later. So, what are the other things an investor can help you with? Will they have expertise? Will they have knowledge? Will they have contacts? What are the things that I want from my investors? And how important is it for you to have a very good working relationship with them? If you're the type person that has to get along with the people that you're doing business with, you need to think about that when you think about your investors. Think about what your mission is. Think about what's the value that you want to bring to the world. Some people talk about this in context of passion, but I don't always refer to it as that because passions can fade. But think about the mission that you want to accomplish and what's the value that you want to bring to the world. That will play in very heavily with the documents you're going to create and in the conversations with investors you meet with. Also, think about the team. Who will help me accomplish my mission? Trying to go it as a lone wolf is not easy in the startup world. It can get quite lonely, and you're not offsetting the weaknesses that you have. So think about who can help you accomplish your mission. What weaknesses do you have that you need to offset? A little note here, the people that help you accomplish your mission shouldn't immediately run to thinking about family and friends. It can be tough to do business with family and friends. In some instances, I've heard about it working, but I very much want you to think about the idea of not going directly to your best friend and bringing him into the business. Usually what happens there is you have this meeting, suddenly you're in business together and you do a 50-50 split of equity, which usually isn't the right way to structure it in the first place because there's no way you're equally bringing value to the startup. So who do you know that could help you accomplish this mission out in the professional world, and who would bring some strengths to offset your weaknesses? Who else is solving this problem? Who will you be competing against? I want to stop you right there. If you're already thinking to yourself that there is no one doing what you're doing at all in the world, then you're thinking about this the wrong way. There are no truly unique ideas in the world. As a matter of fact, let's do a quick example. Who was before Facebook? Can you think about which company existed before Facebook? It was a company called MySpace. A lot of people can answer that one. So there was a competitor to Facebook. It was MySpace. But wait a minute, who was before MySpace? Most people can't answer that one. And it was a company that grew massively large called Friendster. And to this day, they're no longer around. So thinking that you're the only one solving this problem out in the marketplace and that there are zero competitors is actually a bad statement for you to make. If there are no competitors, that means there's not enough demand. So think this through, even go off and research it. Now let's talk about another question. This says, who will my idea stand out? It should say, how will my idea stand out? Again, there are no truly unique ideas in the world, but how can you take an existing model and make your model different? How will your idea stand out? How will people learn about your business? How are you going to market your business? How are you going to get the word out? Another place I want to caution you is there. If you think that you're just going to post a video on YouTube or social media and your idea is going to go viral and you're suddenly going to sell all kinds of your product and service, that's a bad start as well. I want you to think deeper than that about how you truly will market your business and make your idea stand out from everybody else. It is not as easy as just going quote unquote viral. Matter of fact, that's another statement that will turn off your investors. And also, how much money am I willing to risk and invest? How will I fund, it should say fund my growth? Having a little fun with you guys today. You need to be willing to put some of your own money at risk. Again, something else I'm going to talk more in depth on later, but you shouldn't just run off to investors. If you expect investors to put money into your idea, you should put some of your own money at risk as well. Are you willing to do that? Are you willing to risk some of your own money for this idea? Do you feel that passionate about it? And then, how will I fund my growth? This goes back to the whole purpose of this course, which is to improve your chance of landing investors. Are you sure that investors are the right way for you to raise money? There are all kinds of other ways that, frankly, I do not go into in this course. There are grants, there are loans, there are all kinds of other channels in which you can raise money. Are you sure this is the path you want to go down?